Today I'm going to walk you through the animation of a simple ball bounce animation in Maya. You can see I'm using Maya 2024, and I've got a couple settings that I've used. 30 frames a second is going to be my playback speed, and I have auto key set. You'll also notice that I'm in the animation menu, so my workspace is also set to animation. And if I need to see my graph editor, I can just open it up down here. I've created a simple scene down here. Drop a link in the comments if you want to see how I set that up. We'll just go ahead and start with the ball. You'll notice that the ball is above the ground plane and is sitting right at the base of the ground plane. And this is going to be its neutral state. You'll also notice that the transform translates and the rotates are set at 0, the scale is set at 1. So that's what we want. We want the ball to be resting on the ground with all of its transforms set to neutral. So at frame 0, we'll go ahead and start. And again, we'll use simple math on this. So let's translate this to 8 units high. So we'll drop our ball from 8 units, and we'll go ahead and set our initial key using the S key. So hit S, you'll notice on the ball, it creates a little tick mark here on your timeline. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see that the channels turn red here, indicating that there is a key. You'll also notice when I'm not on that frame that they go light red, indicating that there are keys set on this object, but that key is not on that frame. So now that I'm on that frame, you'll notice that they turn dark red. So we start at 8 frames, or 8 units high. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simplify this by going every 10 frames. So at frame 10, we want the ball to have fallen and hit the ground. So we'll just set this translate Y to 0. You'll see that because I have auto key on, it automatically sets a key here at frame 10. So what we're going to do is with every bounce, we're going to have the ball bounce up half as high as it was before. So at frame 0, it was at 8 frames. The ball is going to fall and hit the ground. At frame 20, we'll go ahead and set this to 4 units. At frame 30, we'll go ahead and set this to 0 so that the ball is hitting the ground again. At frame 40, we'll go ahead and set this to 2 units high. At frame 50, we'll go ahead and set this to 0 so the ball is hitting the ground again. You can see it's losing all of its energy, it's losing its momentum. So here it's only going to bounce 1 high. At frame 70, it's going to be in contact with the ground again. At frame 80, we'll do 0.5 units high. And then at frame 90, it'll come to rest at 0 units. We might add a simple little bounce at the very end once we're done with this. So let's go ahead and just play through this and see how it looks. Okay, so we have the general motion of a ball bounce, but you'll notice one of the problems is that when the ball is approaching the ground, it's kind of slowing and stopping. One of the reasons for this is because the computer is filling in all of the data in between the keys that we created. So if we click on this little tab above our time slider, you'll notice that the graph editor comes up. And one of the things you see is this green line here indicates the translate Y, which is our up and down motion. And you'll notice that as the ball is approaching the ground, it's actually slowing down. Its vertical motion is slowing down. So what we need to do is we need to change the tangents of these keys here. Anytime the ball is contacting the ground, we want that motion to be fast and explosive. It's a transfer of energy. The ball is falling to the ground, being pulled by gravity. It's hitting this ground, which in this case is immovable, and then it's exploding back up. So we want these lines here to be very, very fast and sharp instead of being a smooth curve through the key. So the reason for that it's doing this is because Maya by default sets it to automatic tangents. And what we want to do is we want to change the tangents of this key to linear. So you can do that in a couple different ways. You can go here to tangents and you can set that to linear. Or you can click on this little icon right up here in the top menu of the graph editor, and that'll do the same thing. You'll see now that you have 2 little lines coming off of it. These are our tangents, and that point here is kind of a sharp angle. So let's go ahead and select all of these keys using the shift key, and we'll set all of them to linear. Go ahead and backtrack, and now we'll play through again. Okay, so that's actually looking better in terms of the bounces that we have in the ball. One of the problems that we have now though is each bounce is smaller, but it's taking the same amount of time. So what we want to do is we want to make each one of these bounces take a little bit less time. So because we're using simple math, the first bounce here is taking 10 frames to fall from a height and hit the ground. So what I want is I want to compress each one of these successive bounces or keys by 1 frame. So let's say this at frame 10 is where the ball is hitting the ground for the first time. At frame 30, it's hitting the ball a second time. So what we want, or hitting the ground a second time. So what we want to do is we want to bring each one of these keys in one frame. The easiest way to do this is either by selecting in the graph editor. You can drag select around all of these keys. You can go to your move tool, which is the W key. You can hold down shift and use the middle mouse button, and you can just drag them sideways. If that doesn't work, or if that's not the preferred method that you want to use, you can also click in the time slider, hold down shift, click and drag, and you see that it creates a selection here. The inside arrows of this selection allow you to move the selection left and right, and you can see it reflected in the graph editor. So let's go ahead and select these keys. We'll do it in the graph editor here, just for simplicity's sake. Hold down shift, middle mouse button, and move all of these keys down one. Holding the control key, we're going to drag and deselect this middle key of the second bounce, and we're just going to move all of these other keys in one frame. Again, go to my, hold down the control key, deselect this frame. Now these frames, remember I compressed this one bounce, one frame for each of the keys. I want to do it 2 for this second bounce. So with all of these keys selected, I'm going to hold down shift, move it sideways 2 keys, deselect the center key here, move it down 2 keys. And for this third bounce, you guessed it, we want to go ahead and move it down 3 keys. So we'll start with all of these keys selected and move it down 1, 2, 3. Deselect this key, 1, 2, 3. So now you can see each successive bounce is getting shorter and faster. Lastly, we'll deselect this, and this is our last bounce. We'll just go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, 4, and select this last key, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's go ahead and take a look at what our ball bounce looks like. All right, you can see that each one of these bounces is getting shorter and faster. Like I said, once we've compressed these, we'll just go ahead and add a little tiny bounce here at the end. We'll say 0.3 or 0.25. And then here we'll set this to 0 again. So let's go ahead and watch that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. That last one is maybe a little bit fast. Let's go ahead and move it out using that method. So now that last little bounce is a good little hop. And voila, you have a ball bounce. Let's go ahead and take a look at it from several different angles. Right now, we're in the multi-view. You can achieve that by hitting spacebar. Spacebar will maximize whatever window you are floating over. In this case, we'll go to the side view, and we'll take a look at what the ball looks like when it bounces. All right, and it looks like that last bounce is still maybe a little bit fast, so let's just go ahead and move those keys out 1 here. So just drag this out 1, and we'll drag this out 1. All right. One of the issues that we're seeing is that the movement is very linear. So when the ball bounces, it's looking a little bit mechanical. Doesn't really have that flavor. And so one of the reasons is that this curve is sort of very uniform. It doesn't really have a lot of flavor to the curve or accentuation to the curve. And what I mean is that when the ball is bouncing off of the ground, it looks, it just doesn't have that sort of explosive momentum. So one of the ways that we can fix this is we can do it by playing around with the tangents in the graph editor. So in the graph editor, you can select, let's go to just highlight translate Y by clicking on that channel. You'll see it just isolates that curve. We're going to select each one of these keys, and we're going to do what's called breaking the tangents. Right now, if I select a tangent and I rotate it, go to my rotate tool, you can see that it moves the other tangent with it, and it's causing this weird kind of curvature. What we want to do is we want to be able to rotate each one of these tangents individually. With this key selected, you want to just go ahead and click on break tangents, and that allows me to select a tangent and then rotate that tangent individually. And what that does is it allows me to accentuate this explosive motion here. It also makes this curve a little bit more of like a hump as opposed to a gradual up into this flat key here. We can do that with each one of these successive keys. So let's click on that. We'll break tangents. We'll select this tangent. And you can see what I'm doing now is I'm making this curve just a little bit more of a nice round kind of hill structure. Do the same thing on the other side. We'll select that key. We'll break those tangents. Select this. We'll select this tangent over here. We'll do the same thing. And sometimes when they get a little bit flat, you can just expand this up. You can also select these keys, and if you hit the F key, it will zoom into those keys that you have highlighted. It'll also make it so that the curves are more visible. So go ahead and select this key. We'll break those tangents. Make that hill, that rise look a little bit nicer. Do the same thing with this one. We'll break those tangents. And then of course this last curve here, we'll make sure that that's linear. Play around with that. We don't need to break that tangent because there's nothing coming after it. On this one we will. We'll select that. So let's minimize our graph editor. Click on that tab. We'll go back and now let's see what our ball bounce looks like. It's actually looking pretty good. You can see that it does have a little bit more flavor than the previous one. Feels a little bit more energetic, feels a little bit more fun to watch. And I do think that we need to kind of have maybe one little last settling bounce here. So I'll just set this to 0.1 and then I'll just do 0. So let's see how that looks. Let's add that little one here. All right. And there you have it. A very, very simple ball bounce in Maya 2024. Please let me know in the comments if you got any questions and I'd be happy to answer them. And if you have any other ideas for videos that